Coding interviews suck. At least that's what most people say, especially on YouTube, where there is no shortage of videos talking about how broken coding interviews are. I used to be one of these people. I've done close to 100 coding interviews and have failed most of them. I've spent countless hours studying only to face rejection after rejection. Eventually, I realized that coding interviews are going nowhere, so complaining about them would do me no good. Instead, I decided to learn from my experiences and improve. This involved shifting my entire mindset that I had towards coding interviews. I credit this shift to finally cracking the coding interview at big tech companies like Amazon in under 2 years as a self-taught programmer. So much so that now I actually enjoy coding interviews. I made this video to help you guys think of coding interviews in a more positive light and learn how to love the coding interview process instead of hating it. It's about learning to see coding interviews as opportunities for growth and success rather than obstacles. Because think about it, when was the last time you did well at something you hated? So before I go over why I love coding interviews, let's discuss my mindset shift first. I believe that having the right mindset going into something can make all the difference. It's easy to fall into the trap of seeing coding interviews as just another obligation. I found that viewing them as opportunities instead of hurdles helped change the way I look at coding interviews. Think of it like this. Try to shift your mindset from I have to prepare for coding interviews to I get to prepare for coding interviews. Think about how differently you'll approach something if you go in thinking of it as an obligation versus something that you actually want to do. If it's an obligation, you're going to put in the bare minimum. You're going to do the thing that you have to do. Basically, it's going to be a chore for you. And when was the last time you had fun doing chores? By making this conscious shift, everything changes. When you look at things like this, the act of preparing for coding interviews becomes a lot more fun and rewarding. When you can start to have fun with what you're doing, you'll actually want to try harder and maybe even enjoy the process. But let me just say that a positive mindset makes coding interviews more enjoyable in the long term. With mindset out of the way, this leads me to the first reason why I love coding interviews. Coding interviews make software engineering accessible to everyone. In many other industries like law, medicine, or even engineering, breaking into the field requires a formal degree. But in software engineering, things work differently. As long as you can demonstrate your knowledge and problem-solving abilities, your background doesn't really matter. This is very common because there are a lot of software engineers out there who have no formal training in programming, who can go out there and land lucrative tech jobs. This is because coding interviews test fundamental skills over memorization of specific languages or technologies. This means candidates are evaluated based on their ability to think critically, problem solve creatively, and devise efficient algorithms, rather than their proficiency in particular programming languages or frameworks. This is how I was able to enter the tech field despite having a liberal arts degree. Over the years, I've come to learn many different technologies, from Android, backend, React Native, and even web development. This is possible because picking up new technologies is easy, but having the problem-solving ability to use them effectively is the real challenge. And fundamentally, that's what coding interviews test. I like this because it makes a career shift into the tech world a possibility for anybody. Unlike other career fields, which involve spending thousands of dollars to get another degree or certification, as long as I have time to practice, I can train myself to become a programmer. The second reason why I love coding interviews is that they're basically all the same. This is because once you've been on a few coding interviews, you've seen them all. Coding interviews all follow the same format. With the first few minutes, you'll get formalities and introductions out of the way. Then this is followed up by behavioral questions, though not all the time. After which you'll get into the meat of the coding interview, which is the actual whiteboarding portion, which is usually about 30 to 45 minutes. Finally, if there's time, you can end the interview by asking questions to your interviewer. Since the whiteboard portion is the longest portion of the interview, that's where you can focus most of your energy. To get good at coding interviews, you need to focus on 3 things: data structures, Big O notation, and algorithmic thinking. If you can get good in all 3 of those areas, there's a good chance you'll do fine in your next interview. The reason why I know this works is that a few years back, I mentored a friend who wanted to become a software engineer, and it became clear very quickly that he was struggling with fundamental knowledge. He was so focused on solving as many LeetCode problems as possible that he didn't think to review crucial topics such as data structures and Big O. By mentoring him in these areas, he was able to improve his overall problem-solving skills or algorithmic thinking. After some time, he was able to land a junior role at a startup. That is the beauty of coding interviews. You can prep for a Google interview the same way you prep for one at a startup. While most people follow the traditional method of preparing for coding interviews, there is one way to supercharge this. You see, most people grind problem after problem with little progress, or they're too focused on memorizing as many solutions as possible. Not only is this an ineffective strategy, but think ahead to the next time you want to switch jobs. You're going to have to undergo the same process again and again. In my experience, I've developed an intuition for most coding problems that follows something I like to call pattern-based thinking. Every coding interview problem follows a pattern of some sort. The thing is, you have to be able to identify the right pattern to use to solve a problem faster and more efficiently. In fact, there are about 15 common coding patterns that make up the majority of problems out there. It can sometimes take candidates years to understand these patterns intuitively. That's why I've created Tech Interviews IO. The course boasts a tailor-made curriculum to cover the most common coding patterns and problems that I've encountered in my years of experience undergoing close to 100 coding interviews. We even offer in-depth training in behavioral questions, data structures, salary negotiation, and much more. It's the all-in-one solution you need to be able to fast-track your way into a new software engineering job. If that sounds interesting to you, then head on over to Tech Interviews IO and try the free content on there completely risk-free. Just sign up and see for yourself. This brings me to the third reason why I love coding interviews, which is how they can improve your problem-solving skills. You see, at the end of the day, coding interviews are just problems that we need to solve. Like all problems, there are processes we can use to solve these problems more effectively. The same strategies that you use for problem solving in a coding interview are strategies you can use when you get stuck on a project at work. An example would be if you're trying to implement a new feature that you don't fully understand. There are lots of skills that we use in coding interviews that transfer to the real world, like how to ask the right clarifying questions, or exploring different ways to approach a problem. When something is technically really complex, how do we dig into that? And how do we break down that problem so we can come to a working solution? So much of software engineering is solving tricky problems. And if you're a person who can solve those problems that other people aren't able to solve, then that is an incredibly valuable skill. The skills you develop in solving difficult problems are something you can use and apply for the rest of your career. Now, if you have a coding interview coming up, then maybe you need to brush up on your fundamentals. Well, data structures are a great start. That's why in this video, I show you the top 10 data structures you need to know for your coding interviews. So if that sounds interesting to you, then check that out right now. That's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.